We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea.
They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights.
Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man.
That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That slavery, subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition.
Thomas Jefferson, The Declaration of Independence, 1776.
Alexander Stephens, Vice President of the Confederate States of America, 1861.
They're not the rich and famous. Their profit comes not from the thing they sell, but the good they do. Our nation has more than 1.5 million nonprofits that employ 1 out of 10 Americans, providing services that otherwise go unfulfilled, keeping our community connected when all else fails. But nonprofits often lack the tools to properly promote themselves, to inspire more donors and volunteers and clients to their cause. That's where I come in. I've been in the nonprofit world for nearly 20 years. I connect nonprofits with marketing professionals who donate their time and expertise so that, at the end of the day, these life-giving organizations can do more, do better, by creating more, that's right, buzz.
Monuments are all around us, testaments to people and places of the past. Today's Buzz begins with just such a monument, located on the courthouse lawn in Franklin County, Virginia, honoring the county's ancestors who fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War. It's a common monument in the South, but increasingly people are asking, why? Why is it there? What is its origin story? Who and what is it honoring? And who and what is it not? These are the questions being posed by members of the nonprofit Franklin County NAACP. With funding they've received from the Mellon Foundation as part of a Virginia Tech-led initiative titled Monuments Across Appalachian Virginia, the Franklin County NAACP has created a project called Raising the Shade. Their mission? Create new monuments that celebrate the county's 70 African American ancestors who fought for the Union during the Civil War in a branch of the Army known as the United States Colored Troops. But their quest, like the one their ancestors faced 160 years ago, has been fraught with struggle as they're confronting the truth epitomized by the great William Faulkner. All of us labor in webs spun long before we were born. The past is never dead. It's not even past.
So my name is Christopher Coates, and I am the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Rocky Mount, Virginia, a role in which I have served for the last 6 years. I am from North Carolina, and so in the small town where I'm from, Reedsville, North Carolina, in the center of town, there is a Confederate monument. And I can remember one day asking my grandfather what that was. And he told me that it was a Confederate monument. It was not any specific person. It was just an unknown soldier meant to celebrate the Confederacy. And I can remember just taking that and wondering why. Because at this time, I'm probably 3rd, 4th grade, and I'm aware of the Civil War, and I'm aware from my perspective that there are bad guys and there are good guys. And obviously, from my perspective, the Confederacy were the bad guys. And so I never sensed any connectivity with the Confederate monument. And so for me, celebrating something about having 70 soldiers who fought for the Union, for me as an African American and for me as an American, it provides for me, I think, a deeper connectivity that I could identify with these men a little bit easier than I could that unknown Confederate soldier.
Many think that such Confederate monuments popped up immediately after the Civil War, as a headstone, if you will, commemorating those who had just died. But actually, Franklin County's Confederate monument, like so many others dotting southern towns, was erected nearly 50 years after the war. It was a time when the white-gloved United Daughters of the Confederacy on one hand, and the white-hooded Ku Klux Klan on the other, began reasserting white power throughout the South.
I'm Paul Quigley. I'm the James I. Robertson Jr. Associate Professor of Civil War Studies here at Virginia Tech. I'm also Director of the Virginia Center for Civil War Studies. So a few decades after the Civil War, beginning in the 1890s, you see a massive wave of Confederate memorialization. This is when most of the Confederate statues that are around today spring up, roughly 1890s through the 1920s. And there were several reasons for the timing of this. One of the reasons was, the passage of time, and some of the Civil War veterans were dying, and so their community members wanted to commemorate their sacrifices during the Civil War. But the larger reason for the timing of this is that this is the point where white Southerners were really regaining control over local politics and society and the economy a few decades after the Civil War. So the 1890s was also the decade where most Southern states saw disfranchisement of African American voters, despite the gains of Reconstruction. Also the legal codification of Jim Crow segregation. So white Southerners are reasserting control, including racial dominance over black Southerners. And one of the ways they do this is by reminding everyone around them about the Confederacy and the white supremacy, kind of connected what had happened in the 1860s with the world of the 1890s and 1900s. So this is one of the big reasons why you saw a lot of Confederate memorialization then.
This Confederate memorialization continued through much of the 20th century, not just in public spaces, but in public schools. Virginia's official history textbook, published in 1957, downplayed not only slavery's role in the Civil War, but slavery's horrors on African Americans.
I'm Glenna Hawkins Moore. I actually grew up on the street nearby. We're in the Black Park, Mary Bethune Park, and I grew up right nearby. I was actually born in Martinsville because Martinsville had a black hospital. So it was just the birth. Back to Franklin County, back to Rocky Mount, back to Patterson Avenue. Well, I went to a segregated elementary school. It was a segregated school. It was first grade through 12th, and my parents were teachers at Liam Wade. I chose to be a part of the freedom of choice system in Franklin County in 1965. So I was one of about 6 who enrolled at Franklin County Junior High School at that time. And it was, of course, my first encounter with white teachers. In 8th grade, I was studying, the textbook was the 1957, I think, edition of Virginia History and Government. And there were things that first of all, the teacher pronounced the word to me that was Negro as the Negras. The Negras this, the Negras that. The Negras were actually lucky to be enslaved in America rather than being in Africa. From that textbook, I was taught that slavery was not a vicious system, that the black slaves liked their enslavers, that kind of thing.
Like his wife, Larry Moore also grew up in a segregated Franklin County, but moved away for a distinguished career in the U.S. Army.
I probably saw that monument growing up, but I didn't think much about it. When we moved back here in '98, we started talking more about the Civil War. And we would talk about it at home a lot, about where that monument was located, on the courthouse lawn. And we didn't feel like black people could get justice with a Confederate statue sitting on the courthouse lawn, because you had to walk past that statue with the Confederate flag on it, walk into a courthouse where chances were the judge was going to be white, the prosecuting attorney was going to be white, the clerk of the court was going to be white. How could a black person get justice in the courthouse? So we felt that it was an injustice having it on the courthouse lawn.
So in an effort to have the Confederate statue removed from the courthouse lawn, Glenna Moore began a quest to share black history with county officials during the public address portion of Franklin County Board of Supervisors meetings.
During Jim Crow years, Confederate statues were being erected throughout Virginia by white women connected to powerful men, powerful husbands, fathers, grandfathers, and sons, who were most likely ex-Confederate officers, business owners, attorneys, judges, doctors, state and local federal legislators. In 1902, Franklin County...
She told the history of their Confederate statue, how in 1910, 45 years after Robert E. Lee surrendered his Confederate troops at Appomattox, the Jubal Early chapter of the Daughters of the Confederacy raised $1,800, including $600 from county coffers, to build a statue on the courthouse lawn. But Glenna Moore's public addresses fell on ears that perhaps weren't deaf, but at least misinformed, she believes, due to the myths they'd been taught in school.
I looked at the Board of Supervisors and studied them and realized most of them are my age. I know what they were taught. I know what textbooks they were taught from. So they really believed that that statue represented what Virginia, what Franklin County should be. And they saw it as a positive. They have no idea what it was like being black in Franklin County. So that's what I did. I just shared, for 4 years, I just shared local black history.
But her work was not completely in vain, for it was during her research that she stumbled upon an unknown chapter in the history of African Americans in Franklin County.
I was puzzled sometimes about the things that were said about African Americans in America. I was given the impression that we never fought for ourselves. I mean, I've just realized that in learning about the United States colored troops within the last few years.
Armed with this knowledge, the Moores tried a different tack with county officials. In this 21st century struggle over statues, the Moores decided if you can't beat them, join them. They called their project Raising the Shade, with a goal of creating monuments honoring 70 United States colored troops, whose birthplace was noted in military records as Franklin County, Virginia. But who were these brave black men from Franklin County who fought for the Union to free their brothers and sisters from Southern slavery?
The United States Colored Troops is a kind of umbrella term for African American troops who fought for the Union during the American Civil War. And the Bureau of Colored Troops was formed by the U.S. government in 1863, which was the point at which the U.S. government finally decided they were going to allow and even welcome African American soldiers to formally enlist in the U.S. military to fight against the Confederacy. From the very beginning of the war, African Americans frequently wanted to be part of the fight, and they were denied that opportunity to begin with by the US government and the Lincoln administration, who pretty much said, this is a war to restore the Union. We don't want to turn it into something bigger. We don't want to turn it into a war for emancipation as well. Now, African Americans immediately recognized the potential that this could turn into a war for emancipation. They knew that the southern states had seceded to preserve the long-term interests that they had in slavery, and so they recognized that even a war that started over the Union could easily turn into a war that could end slavery eventually.
My name is Dawn Chitty. I'm the Director of Education at the African American Civil War Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. The United States Colored Troops was recruited largely out of these contraband camps. So just give you a case in point. Michelle Obama, she has an ancestor that is in the United States Colored Troops, was in the United States Colored Troops. Her ancestor was recruited out of Corinth, Mississippi, which was a contraband camp that housed about 50,000 people. So you have kind of like a camp captive audience because these enslaved persons are leaving plantations and they're following the Union Army. And so the Union Army is establishing what became contraband camps, and they're recruiting out of these contraband camps. So that's mainly how the soldier force is built for the United States Colored Troops, out of these contraband camps.
I'd say the participation and the contributions that black soldiers made rank very highly among the factors that allowed Union victory to happen. African Americans made up about 10% of total Union armed forces throughout the Civil War. So there were about 180,000 black soldiers and about 20,000 black sailors by 1865. So even just the numbers, 10%, maybe isn't the decisive group of troops to turn the tide, but certainly is going to have a big influence on the outcome of a conflict. But then even more significant, I think, was the timing of the enlistment of black troops in large numbers. So this began to take place in 1863 after the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st that year. And so the first half of 1863, you see the beginnings of a massive enlistment effort, which ultimately results in these tens of thousands of African Americans joining the USCT regiments. And 1863 just happened to be a time in the war when white Northern morale and commitment to the Union war effort was beginning to flag. And so you may be familiar with the New York City draft riots in July 1863. So you've got white Northerners who are becoming tired of the Civil War. They don't want to enlist in the way that they did in 1861. And this is the moment when large numbers of black troops come online and join the Union war effort. So that timing made them even more significant, I think, than the numbers might suggest.
For them, they faced a lot of things like, for example, pay differences. When the United States Colored Troops is established in 1862, Congress voted at that time to pay them basically $10 per month, which is $3 less than the standard private soldier. In addition to that $10, they would deduct $3 per month for uniform, which is not something that the rest of the Union soldiers are having to face. So this is a difference that they are aware of, and they're deciding to fight anyway.
One of the things that makes the service of these soldiers even more remarkable is that they faced particular perils that white soldiers didn't face, because the official response of the Confederate government to the enlistment of black soldiers in the Union forces was to say, if we capture black soldiers in Union uniforms on the battlefield, we will treat them as enslaved people who have escaped and are engaged in insurrection against the laws of the Confederacy. And therefore we'll treat them accordingly, either by re-enslaving them or by executing them. So those are the dangers that these black soldiers faced that their white counterparts didn't have to think about.
Dawn Chitty says there are 6,000 Civil War monuments in the United States, but fewer than 25 memorialize the service of the United States Colored Troops.
What that means is that there's a generation of young people yet to be born, or those that are small that will never know. They won't understand what the United States Colored Troops was, who they were as a people, and how they reflect them as an American citizen. So I think that that's something that we should consider as a country. How does our public landscape reflect the public's actual memory of an event as significant as the Civil War?
Raising the Shades research has resonated not just with the county's African American citizens, but whites as well.
My name's Eric Anspaugh. I'm the president of the Franklin County NAACP in my second year.
I'm Bethany Worley. I'm the executive director of the Blue Ridge Institute and Museum of Ferrum College.
Hi, my name's Ed Saunders. I'm a Franklin County resident. Lived here for 4 years now. I've been all over the country, worked kind of all over the place. I'm a combat vet. I was in Iraq, so I kind of come into this from that standpoint, kind of service related.
I am excited as a member of the NAACP and its current president to be a part of this Mellon Foundation project, Raising the Shade, 1850 to 1910.
I'd read about it in the paper, and I'd heard some people talking about it. And of course, I had heard all about the monument on the courthouse lawn, but then I started hearing about these 70 soldiers, and I had no idea. I mean, I'm very humbled to hear about this, and I thought, well, this is history. This is something that needs to be documented. And so, as a history museum, it was perfect for us to be a part of this.
You think of war, you think of losing your life. When you look at the African American gentlemen and what they were willing to sacrifice, it wasn't just life, it was torture, it was maltreatment, like it was things that were far worse than death. And as an American, like freedom, it's what we're all striving for. We want our kids to be safe, we want our kids to be free, we want our kids to have more opportunity than we do. And so for me, it's a simple matter of these guys fought for the ideals that make up America. Everybody should be free.
We have within our community a Veterans Memorial that recognizes other veterans from World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and here we have 70 black men who are veterans of the United States. And I say the NAACP feels very strongly that this community needs to know this story, but not just this community, a wider community.
I'm really excited to be part of this committee, and I think this is a very positive thing for Franklin County, because I think it's bringing together folks, community folks, scholars to talk about an unknown aspect of Franklin County history.
We all know the Confederate story. We all know that. It's like every other monument to people who die in war. They shouldn't have to. This is a rich man's war. It was a rich man's desire to keep the property that they had, and poor men were sent to fight it. Do the Afghans put up a monument to the Taliban? These were people that wanted to rend their country and apart. That it doesn't make sense to me. The more folks that we can educate, and the more we can show how folks kind of went out of their way to win their own freedom. I mean, again, that's something we should all be celebrating.
If we knew and understood our history better, I think it would erase some of the ambiguity that exists around, or even the negativity that exists around why you feel that way or why do you think that way. My personal hope would be that as more people hear this story, know this story, and then hopefully understand and can take to heart this story, that some of the racial division or conflict that still exists might soften and hopefully even more be erased.
Buzz will continue following the Franklin County NAACP through 2025. In May, the Monuments Across Appalachian Virginia grant from Virginia Tech will fund a community-wide forum to share a more complete story about Franklin County during the Civil War. And by the end of the year, the group plans to erect a new statue honoring its ancestors who fought for the Union in the United States Colored Troops. It won't be on the courthouse lawn, but up the road in front of the county's first African American church. A fitting location, according to Pastor Christopher Coates.
So the church itself was started in 1882, and this is after Reconstruction, where there are a number of former slaves who now have their emancipation, and they have decided to start a religious institution. And they raised $500 with, the meager wages of something like $2 a day, or $2 a week. And they do this to erect a place where they can go worship unobstructed. I think that screams persistence. And to talk about a soldier who would fight for a country that is just articulating its affection for him is also, I think, screams persistence. The connectivity of the First Baptist Church and the United States Colored Troops, I think they basically go hand in hand.
I'm hoping that with the monument here raising the shade in Franklin County, that it will literally raise the shade. It will open the door for people to engage in another set of dialogue that basically tells us more about this story, more how we as a diverse people in America fit into this narrative together, how we all contribute to the making of the country. And I think that basically one more public marker like this statue will add to that narrative and be able to open the door for us to have those kinds of discussions.
Perils that these African American soldiers faced on the battlefield, even just in that initial act, many of them managed to escape from enslavement in order to go and join up with the Union forces. So the bravery, the sacrifice, and really the commitment to American values and ideals, I think, is on such full display in the stories of these African American soldiers. If we're not going to commemorate these stories, then what is worth commemorating?